Now, please join me in welcoming John Gingrich of Accenture to present the first award for the Magical Team.
Thank you, John. Hello, and what an honor to be with you all to present the Magical Team Award. Understanding and respecting the power of collaboration and teamwork is embedded in our culture, so this award truly speaks to us, and very happy to be part of the presentation. In any organization, every so often, a team or division comes together to exceed already lofty expectations and takes the world by storm. Individual focus is put to the side for the greater good of the team, which serves to further solidify their strength and resiliency. This team rose to the challenge, and they absolutely nailed it. Accenture continues to have the honor to work with this organization, and I have witnessed firsthand the power of their strength in numbers approach, which helped create this magical team. We are so pleased to be presenting the 2017 Magical Team Award to the Golden State Warriors. Let's welcome assistant coach Mike Brown, who will be joined on stage for a conversation with television analyst Jim Barnett. Guys, come on up.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Jim, come on up. We're going to take a picture.
We're going to take a photo of it, huh?
Okay.
John, thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. I never made it to the ESPYs, I never made it to the Emmys, but I've made it to the Churchills. And
Pretty good.
it's pretty exciting. Didn't know much about it ahead of time, but did a little homework here, and Mike and I are certainly glad to be here representing the Golden State Warriors. And I think it was very appropriate. I'm listening to all the adjectives that describe our team, the nouns, and that does fit us to a T. They're a very special team. Over the last 3 years, in 2014-15, they had a record of 67-15, won the NBA championship. The next year, they set an NBA all-time record for regular season, 73-9. I don't think that'll ever be broken. Unfortunately, they didn't win the championship that year. Then they came back last year, which was Mike's first year as coming to the Warriors as an associate head coach. And once again, 67-15, won the NBA championship, and in the process, swept the first three opponents in the playoffs, and then beat Cleveland in the finals 4-1. So that's a 16-1 record. That's an all-time best in playoff history as well. They produced two-time MVP Stephen Curry. They've added last year. And we can see it. We'll talk with Mike how that integrates, bringing in a former MVP and Kevin Durant. They had 4 All-Stars this year. Steve Kerr's been Coach of the Year. Our Bob Myers, our General Manager, Executive of the Year once again this year. It just goes on and on and on. So now I'm going to ask Mike how this all transpires and how do you keep it going. My first question, though, Mike, is do you always eat your dessert before the entree?
You saw that. Well, I knew we were going to come up here. I wasn't quite sure the order, so I figured,
okay,
why not eat the best part of dinner before I got up on stage?
So it was just an aberration.
No.
Anyway.
It happens every once in a while.
Okay. The Magical Team Award, I think that kind of says it all and captures the essence of the Golden State Warriors. You came on this last year. I've been around a long time with them. I think they're unique. I've been around the NBA since 1966. Was there anything that surprised you about this team put together and the coaching staff and the way they run the operation that you didn't know before?
I've been with a lot of teams, a lot of different organizations, and some successful, some not. Some successful, maybe not record-wise, but as an organization they were. And another one that comes to light is the San Antonio Spurs. I was with them for 3 years and part of a championship team in 2003. The biggest thing that kind of surprised me about this organization is how laid back everybody is. And when you talk about truly being in a family environment, which a lot of companies, a lot of organizations talk about, there are a lot of different definitions. This organization is about as close to being a family as any that I've been a part of. And because they're truly, in my opinion, a family, that's where the laid backness comes in. You can be yourself. You don't have to put on a front that you're working harder than the next guy just to keep your job or to get a raise or because that's what you're supposed to do. Everybody knows what their job is. Everybody does their job. Nobody's looking over your shoulder. But while you're doing your job, you have fun with one another. And we, from the top on down to the bottom, we truly, honestly have fun with one another. And one more thing that was different for me when I joined the organization is they told me that I knew where the practice facility was. It was down in the coach's locker room, which is down where the players' locker room is, and the gym and all that. And one of the video guys is like, "Coach, I'm going to take you up to your office." I said, "Okay, my office is upstairs." I had never been upstairs. And I said, "Okay, I'll follow you." And we go up the stairs, and we walk, once we get to the top of the stairs, we walk into this huge open room. And literally everybody's in there, from marketing to community relations to so on and so forth. And at first, again, I was with good organizations and so on and so forth, but at first I was a little taken aback. I'm like, my office is with everybody else in the organization? Normally it's the coaches are at the practice and the players at the practice facility and everybody else in the front office is wherever that may be. And, I was a little skeptical at first, didn't know how it was going to work. And Jim, I love it. It's not just is it a family atmosphere amongst our team, the players, the coaches, the training staff, and all that, but literally everybody else. I mean, I enjoy going to practice. I think more so I could socialize with all the people in the front office than the actual practice because they're great people. So it's a fantastic organization from that standpoint.
Mike's been a head coach in the NBA, 6 years in Cleveland with the LA Lakers, been around for 20 years. And it's interesting, when he got hired, I just remember I was there at the press conference, and Steve Kerr, he wasn't talking about X's and O's and how much expertise that he has and how he can relate to the players himself or whatever, but he was saying he wanted him on the staff primarily because of relationships. He's a good guy. He's fun to have around, knows what he's doing. And that's what they do, try to create. They create relationships. It's not all about having the best ability, perhaps.
No, it is. It's about enjoying one another, enjoying the process. And if you're able to do that, away from, in our business, the X and O part or the actual practice part or the actual game part, if you can enjoy one another, the right way, then, the sky's the limit.
NBA players have a lot of money, make a lot of money nowadays. They have huge egos. They've got a lot of power. How do you get them to buy in? Even someone who may be on the outside in other teams may have a bad reputation, and yet somehow you can bring them into your organization and they assimilate very, very well. What's the key? How do you get them to buy into all this?
It's talking to Joe Dumars, who's a guy that played in the NBA. He's a Hall of Famer, and He's a general manager of the Detroit Pistons, and when they've won a couple of championships, he's a guy that is one of my mentors. And a few months ago, and what he told me reminds me of this organization. We were just talking about jobs, different head coaching jobs, and so on and so forth. And he said, Mike, if you ever get another opportunity, to interview for a head job, he said, I know if I'm interviewing you, you'd have a real good chance of getting that job if you come into my office and we sat down, and the first thing that you tried to get across to me is how you're going to embrace or lay down the foundation for a great culture. He said, I'm not worried about the X's and O's. I'm not worried about how hard you're going to work and all that other stuff, because if I didn't think you were a hard worker, or if I didn't think you understood the game of basketball, like most people do, because, everybody's played basketball for the most part since they were in second, third grade. And so everybody, to a certain degree, understands the nuances of the game. They have a feel for it. And he said, if I didn't know those things, you wouldn't be in my office anyway. And so what I'm looking for is, hey, what are you going to do to establish something that will last long term? And, when you talk about Joe and Rick and Bob and Steve, you talk about leadership. In my opinion, those guys have laid a terrific foundation down culturally here. And for Steve, again, in my opinion, it started with one key player. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, I know, Steph Curry. No doubt. Which is close, because you talk about a fantastic human being. He is top of the list. But it was Andre Iguodala. From the outside looking in, Steve, as a young coach that never coached before, and when I say young, and not age-wise, he's older than me. I hope that gets back to him somehow, some way. But in terms of experience, his first year, he comes into the door and he looks a guy in the eye that has been an all-star before, who's been in the league a long time, who makes more than him. And that's the one thing that's different from our business than most other businesses is the guys that work for us actually make more than us. But, to look him in the eye and say, hey, can you come off the bench? And that's not easy when you're dealing with, again, the egos and the money involved and so on and so forth, because that could drastically affect the outcome or bottom line of what Andre's going to make in the future. And it could shorten his career, because people may think that, hey, he's coming off the bench because he's done or whatever. And so for Steve to have the foresight to go to him and ask him to do that, and Andre to accept it the way that he did, being a veteran that's well respected not only in the locker room here in Golden State, but around the league, and then for him to have success individually he was the MVP that year in the finals, and for the team to have success, that just solidified, in my opinion, the culture that is in place today. And now you take guys like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond and the rest of the guys, and they've all embraced it. And it's hard to go away from it, because everybody works so hard at making sure that that's right.
I'm convinced that it does start with Steve Kerr. You've got the talent, yes, and everyone has to have talent to win. But his leadership qualities, I think a great leader hires people, empowers them. And the evidence for that is 2 years ago, with the back problem that he had and all the pain, he missed the first 43 games of the season. And Luke Walton, who'd never coached before, was an assistant coach, took over, and they were 39-4 under Luke Walton. What is it that you've noticed about Steve Kerr, his leadership abilities, and what makes him unique? Because I've often said this. First of all, I'll tell you this. I've never met a finer man. And that includes Bob Myers. These are fine men. I'm proud and fortunate to be a part of that organization in the small part that I am. But I've often said, I used to say about Steve Kerr that he could be the governor of California, and now I'm convinced he could be the president, but that's another story. So, what is it?
You said that.
I said it. What is it about Steve that is so special? His ability to communicate amazes me.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm going to throw his name in the mix one more time, but going through the years of being in the NBA and working for San Antonio, I worked for a guy named Greg Popovich. Pop, in my opinion, he's the best of all time. Now, I wasn't around when Red Auerbach was around and so on and so forth. So in my opinion, it's Pop. And the one thing that when people ask me, why do you think he's the greatest coach of all time? My answer is short and simple. He's the best people manager that I've ever been around. And, I coached Steve actually in San Antonio, so I had a relationship with Steve over the years. And, and now working for him the first time or being around him in this capacity was a special year for me because he is a fantastic human being. And now to work for him throughout the course of the year, you get to know him in a different light. And, I can't sit up here and say that Steve is the best X and O coach out there. He's good, but is he the best? I don't know. He's a great person, but the one thing I do know about Steve is he is up there with Greg Popovich in terms of being the best people manager that I've ever been around or that I've ever seen even from afar. And in any business that you're in, if you are or want to be a leader, it's not necessarily about whether or not you know a ton about the business or not. In my opinion, in today's world, you have to be able to manage people and their individual spirits or personalities. And Steve does that phenomenally, exceptionally well. And part of that is his communication skills. His communication skills are off the charts. I mean, I've been coaching for a long time, and every single time that he addressed the team this year, again, I'm speaking for myself, I was locked in. And I was locked in not just listening to the message, but I was locked in to see how he delivered the message and how long the message was and what were his different points and, whether or not, he had certain body languages during certain points and so on and so forth. And I learned a lot from him as an experienced veteran coach, just watching him communicate with our group. And, part of that, we were talking a little bit about this on the ride down, is he has an emotional intelligence that, some people say it can be taught. I don't know if it can be taught at the level that he has it. He just has, he has a feel for each individual person in that locker room that is off the charts. And he knows how to take what he feels from each person because, you have 15 different players and they make X amount of dollars. And so that's 15 different personalities that you have to kind of get to buy into the message all at once the same way. And he's able to do that based on his emotional intelligence that he has and the feel that he has for the group as a whole and for each individual person in that room, which is remarkable.
So you cultivate that culture, and that's why you can bring people in like Kevin Durant and assimilate them right into the whole system, and then everybody buys into that. We have a little less than a minute, and you mentioned Stephen Curry. He is very special. Can you tell us not what he does? We know what he does on the court. We know how he can shoot like nobody else in the NBA and probably the history of the league. But his leadership, how he does that, and how do the players look to him for his special kind of leadership?
Steph is a quiet leader. He'll maybe every once in a while speak up and say something. Our most vocal guy is... Oh, my gosh, these guys know us.
Steve's still working on emotional intelligence on that.
No, Draymond is our most vocal leader, which is what we need. We need his toughness and and so on and so forth. But Steph is a guy, a lot of guys on our level, even though they make a ton of money, they're in a ton of commercials, you see them on TV all the time, they're not as secure with themselves as you would think when it comes to being around their peers and or in pressure situations. And Steph is a guy, in my opinion, that is so confident in himself that he probably has the most confidence in himself than almost any other player that I've been around. And our guys feed off of that. And when they feed off of it, it gives the rest of our guys confidence and reassuredness and a calmness that, again, it's hard to be taught. So he's somebody that, from the outside looking in, you see him making a lot of threes and making all these big plays. But in pressure situations, when it's on the line or anytime Steve's getting on him or anything like that, he's a guy that accepts anything and everything graciously because he's so sure and confident of himself. And that's a unique attribute that not many people truly have.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for sharing. And I think that's our time. Thank you for making the Golden State Warriors, our team, the most magical team. And I think for over the next few years, I don't know who the other competition is. They probably could win the award again. That's what I'm expecting.
Well,